between the wars, 12th chapter. Here we will study the history and the world wars. In the first half of the 20th century, that is 1900 to 1950, which is called first half of the 20th century, two major world wars broke out. One is World War One and World War Two, and their consequences, and the creation of an international organization struggling for world peace, that is United Nations Organization. So let us see that this 20th century, which is that it is 1900 to 1999. Okay, so first half of the 20th century experienced two world wars. So this 20th century called as the age of extremes. What we call it, the age of extremes. This is the name given by a historian. His name is Eric Hobsbawm. Eric Hobsbawm, who was a historian, called 20th century as age of extremes. Look at the person, the historian Eric Hobsbawm in figure 12.1. So let us see that why did he call 20th century as age of extremes? Extremes in the sense some changes which so far not occurred in the world happen in 20th century. Up to 20th century, there was no change. But in 20th century, certain changes have occurred. So he called it the age of extremes. So what are the changes happen in 20th century? Okay. The first one, there a new ideology emerged in the world. That new ideology is fascism. Which one? Fascism. Fascism developed in 20th century. This is the first change. So what is fascism? It is based on unquestioned power. The leader of the nation enjoys unquestioned power. There is no right to anyone to question the leader, that is unquestioned power. And it believes that nation is very strong and superior to other one. From that, hatred develops. So it is based on the idea of unquestioned power and hatred towards other nations, that is other people. So this is the ideology developed there in the 20th century. And second change which occurred in 20th century is several nations were under colonial rule. They faced a lot of trouble in the colonial rule and they wanted freedom from the colonial rule. They wanted a new form of government in which the power is in the hands of the people. That is, In another side, several nations wanted democracy. So democracy started in the 20th century. It was growing very much in the colonial nations. Before to 20th century, there was no importance and demand for democracy. So democracy started growing in the world. And third is the life expectancy also increasing at the time due to the growth of the medicine. Their medicine has developed and that increased life expectancy. That is the average life span of the people. So with the help of medicine, the life expectancy started increasing by the discoveries made in the medicine. This is third change. And the fourth one is the literacy levels also increased. Before to this 20th century, many of the people were uneducated. Literacy levels were very low in the world. There many schools were established so that the literacy level started increasing. Third change, that is the literacy level increased in 20th century. Hundreds of countries turned to independent nations all over the world which were earlier under colonial rule. And the countries which turned to independent nations, in which some nations have made an experiment with a new ideology, that is socialism. Socialism is an ideology emerged first in USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, nothing but Soviet Union. After the end of the two world wars, several countries have got independence. In that, USSR formed there and started an experiment with the new ideology socialism. So fascism, a new ideology developed. Nazism in Germany, that is also an ideology developed, and socialism also developed. What is socialism? In socialism, we find everything will be under the control of a state. All the lands, factories in a nation are under the control of state, and that what we call state owned lands and factories and planned development. The development will be planned one, and it is a new ideology ensuring equality and fraternity of all the people. In order to generate equality and brotherhood relation among the people, socialism ideology developed in the world, first in USSR, that is in Soviet Union, and some other nations. Those are America, Britain, France. These are the nations. They too followed a new ideology called liberal democracy. Liberal democracy refers to ensuring the political liberty with multi-party democracy. It is a system where political parties will enjoy liberty and there will be existence of multi-party system. Several political parties will appear in liberal democracy and they followed capitalistic economic system. What is capitalistic economic system? Where everything, that means the means of production, will be under the control of private persons. where means of production is under the control of capitalist persons is called capitalist economic system. This is opposite to the socialism. In socialism we find means of production will be under the control of a state in the sense nation. So these are the changes occurred in the 20th century. And at the beginning of the 20th century, the world split into two groups. One is industrially developed nations. Which nations? Some nations developed in industries. Those are Britain, America, Germany, France, and Italy. These are the industrial nations, and remaining countries are colonized by these nations. So, there, Britain, France, Germany, these nations have colonies in Asia, Africa. So, what do we see here? The world split into two parts. One side, colonial nations, another side, industrial nations. Industrial nations are developed in industries. They want raw material. For the sake of raw material, they established political control on the Asia and African countries. So we see here these nations started ruling the world nations. And another thing, in industrial countries, they developed enmity for the sake of establishing political control on other nations, and also for search of raw material. There, these industrial nations, due to the competition for raw material and political domination on the Asia and African countries, made these industrial nations to turn into two groups. Okay, one is here Germany, Austria, Hungary. They turn to one block, one group, and another is Britain, France, Russia. These are the what countries that are they turn to what to call it two blocks, which we call as secret blocks instead. So their secret groups were formed in early 20th century. Groups were formed in early 20th century. So these are the changes we find in the early 20th century instead. And another thing is that here the First World War and Second World War also happened there. And these two blocks, that is Germany, Austria and Hungary, this is one side, Britain, France and Russia another side. They wanted to dominate the world, and they wanted to expand their colonies and expand their colonies in the world. The First World War began in 1914. That was, very dangerous war in which several nations have fought. That is, it took part China, Japan on the east. It means that this World War One had touched from east to west. Okay, that means in the east side it touched Japan, and at west it touched United States of America. And this World War ended in 1918 with the defeat of the Germany. Okay, so let us see how the World War One occurred and what are the causes of the World War One. Okay, look at here the figure 12.2. What do you see in this figure? During the World War One time, their allied nations, what you call Britain, France, and what you call it is uh, allied nations, that what you call Britain, France, Russia. They formed a triple entente, and these nations used atom bombs. And at that time, they thrown atom bombs from the planes. Okay, so this is what atom bomb dropping from the planes. Okay, so let's see that causes of the world wars. There are several causes for the world war one. One is aggressive nationalism. This is one of the causes of the world war one. So what is aggressive nationalism? See, it is different from nationalism. What is nationalism? It is a feeling towards nation and love towards nation. Nationalism is a positive impulse because with the idea of nationalism, several modern nations were created in Europe because of the people's strong feeling that they are one. Nationalism is a feeling towards nation that they all are one. When this feeling becomes much more, then the pride starts among the people and hatred against the other countries, and that what we call aggressive nationalism. Aggressive nationalism is a ideology which creates pride for their nation and hatred for the neighboring countries. So because of this aggressive nationalism, we see that two ideologies developed in Italy and Germany. One is Fascism in Italy, and Nazism, which is also called National Socialism of Germany, developed in Germany. Okay. In short, we can say that Nazism in Germany, Fascism in Italy. These are the ideologies based on aggressive nationalism. Which one? Aggressive nationalism. So it is a destructive mode. What is by destructive mode? They feel that their nations are superior in the world and they hate other nations. So here, fascist, that means people who follow fascism in Italy are called fascist. So fascist promoted that aggressive nationalism of the Germany is going to rule over the world. There, the fascists that developed Germany with the idea of Nazism going to rule the world. And these Nazis also developed the superiority of the fascism that they are going to rule the world. So here the fascists mobilized the what people against the what other nations. So we see that these two ideologies, Nazism and fascism, turn to the causes for the World War One, which are based on aggressive nationalism. So, aggressive nationalism is one of the causes of the World War One. And second cause for the World War One is imperialism. So, what is imperialism? Imperialism is it is what to call the rivalry competition between industrial powers. Okay, you know, there the industrial capitalism, that means the industrial nations, Britain, Germany, and America, they wanted access to the raw material and markets for their finished products. So they wanted to invest their capital in the colonies, So by the end of the 19th century, there a race developed, a rivalry race. Okay, that means an enmity race among the industrial nations developed for the sake of raw material and search of what to call marketplaces. So the race for the colonies between European powers started in the end of the 19th century, that what we call imperialism. It means a competition for establishing colonies and raw material and search of marketplace among the industrial nations is called imperialism. They wanted that much more raw material for their industries. Raw material was shortage in their nations, so they wanted raw material of other nations in order to produce finished goods and sell in rest of the world to earn much more money. Okay, so for the sake of raw materials and for the market centers, they turn to enemies, and that is what imperialism. You know that the Britain had established a vast what to call empire in the world. Britain's empire is the largest empire in the world. It set up its political domination from the west to east. Okay, so the industrial capitalism divided the industrial nations into old industrial powers and new industrial powers. You know, the Britain, France, these are the what old industrial powers, whereas Germany and Italy, they turn to industrial powers later. So these are called new industrial powers. So new industrial powers also wanted share for selling the finished goods and raw material from the colonies which were under the control of old industrial powers. Whereas old industrial powers did not accept in sharing the water colonies with the new industrial powers. So the new industrial powers wanted to wage war with the old industrial powers. So this is the water competition between new industrial powers and old industrial powers led to the world wars. Okay, so the enmity relation and the competition, that means the race between the old industrial powers and new industrial powers, created a tension of war among the world countries, and that resulted in a World War One. So imperialism also turned to one of the causes of the World War One. Okay.